So now that the announcement has been made, let me open up let me share our screen and then we can get started. Does everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, I am Jocelyn Wright, and I have two other co-presenters here with me who will present themselves briefly. And while we are doing that, we would like to also know why you chose to come to this session. But Cheryl has suggested that it might be good to just type your comments in the chat and wait until we've finished presenting ourselves so that everyone has the chance to kind of write a few words. And then we can share them together and look at them together in a moment, since that will mean that we're not influencing anyone's comments. So I am from Mukpo National University in the south of this country. And I'll pass it on to Cheryl and Virginia to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I'm Cheryl Woelk, and I'm based in Seoul. And right now I'm working with Collective Joy Consulting as an education consultant and a teacher with professionals who are doing international and multicultural work from Korea.
And I'm Virginia, and I teach at Korea University Sejong campus, and I teach more general education courses for people in a couple of electives.
All right, so we'd like to invite you when you're ready to just press the, I guess, enter button and share your comments. Why you are here with us today. Why did you choose this session? Super, I see Namiko has sent a comment from Tokyo, interested in the topic. Okay, and SDGs, right? Sustainable Development Goals. Patrick, okay. I wonder where you're from, Patrick, or where you're based. You said you're interested in peace and social justice and environmental issues. Great, a great range there. Okay. And you'd like to find some inspiration. Cheryl, would you like to read a few comments?
Yeah, some curiosity about what this is and having heard of something similar and wanting to know more. The topic sounded good. Some people from Japan. Yeah. Great. Well, and feel free to add comments or questions in the chat as we're talking. We will have time for quite a bit of discussion after Jocelyn and Virginia and I have a chance to share a little bit. Then hopefully we can open it up and have some more conversation. But if you have a question that comes to mind, feel free to type it in the chat at any point.
Yeah, so as Cheryl was saying, we kind of wanted to organize this session in two parts. So first of all, we're going to share a little bit of background and some experiences of our own, but we're going to try our best to keep that to about 5 minutes per person so that there's enough time for you to discuss your own experiences or ask questions at the end. So yeah, as Cheryl mentioned already, if you'd like to write any questions in the chat as we go along, feel free to. If you want to just save them for the end, and they don't have to be questions either. They can be, as I said, comments about your own experience. So hopefully we'll be able to have enough time to share. Are there any questions before we begin? All right, then I'm going to pass the floor on to Cheryl.
All right. So speaking of floors, I heard that in these kind of virtual conferences, sometimes it's hard to feel grounded, hard to forget that we are three-dimensional people. So something that I sometimes do for myself and in classes is to ask you about something in your environment that you notice, something that you feel, like the floor under your feet or the cool air, or if you smell something or if you hear something. You can just write it in the chat, just one word, something from your environment that you notice right now. And this one you can hit enter as soon as you think of it. All right. We have some warm slippers. We hear motor scooters. We have cold feet. We see a green plant sitting on a hard chair, smell of rolls cooking. The window is open. All right. So we are people. We are human. Sometimes it's easy to forget. And what are we talking about when we talk about peace and language and education? I think one of the key things is that these are all concepts that we are creating. We're constructing these concepts together. And as we're talking, you may notice that some people have little bit different understandings. And that's because all of these concepts we're co-constructing them, and they are emerging and changing and dynamic, and they are culturally specific or contextually specific, culturally specific as well. So we are creating these constructs together and using them in a way that is helpful for us to make real change in our world. So I want to kind of go through a couple of terminology to kind of give you an idea of some of the ideas related to the concept. So the first one is about peace, the term peace. And when we're talking about peace in this session, we're talking about a multidimensional concept. This is something that refers to not just like the absence of war or the absence of violence, but a positive peace, which is often referred to, not just negative peace, in inner peace, interpersonal, intergroup, intercultural, international, and even ecological peace. So it's a very holistic concept. It's broad and dynamic in scope, so it really can change over generations, over time, and in context. You'll find that people even talk about peace differently depending on what situation they're in. So often you'll hear people talk about how peace is actually a lens, that we can see anything through the lens of peace and look at things from a peace perspective. So I got involved in peace work and peace education work in Korea a number of years ago. When I first came to Korea, it was to work with an English class consisting of young people from North Korea and South Korea together. And our topic of conversation was peace. We were using peace education principles and learning English. And on one of the first days, I realized how different we had, how different our constructions of the concept of peace was, because we asked them to draw a picture of what they thought peace was and then talk about it. One of the South Korean participants drew a lovely pond scene, very nice nature scene. Another participant from North Korea drew a knife with an X over top. And when she talked about it, she said, "Peace is not having to carry a knife with me." So we realized, oh, this is very different. And so it prompted me to learn more. And I found since then, I've been studying and learning more about peace and the concept of peace building. And the concept of peace building, Lisa Shirk has done a lot of work with this in strategic peace building. She talks about it as something that is preventing, reducing, transforming, and helping people recover from violence in all forms, even structural violence that's not yet coming out, emerging in society. And at the same time, it's more the positive piece as well, helping people to be empowered and to foster relationships at all of these multi-dimensional levels that are sustaining. So it's a very, very broad concept as well, but it has an active element to it. We are actively working at creating peace in all of the different dimensions. And so in this, there's a clear role for educators. In Korea, the restorative justice movement is something that's happening in public schools these days. I don't know if any of you have been encountered that, but there is a growing number of educators who are interested in working with how we respond to behavior in the classroom in ways that promote good relationships and sustaining relationships, and as well as responding to harm done, whether that's direct violence or indirect violence. Peace building is like the active work of trying to create peace in multiple dimensions. Peace education is another concept that we'll be talking about. And that is the practice and scholarship that is working at undoing violence and also building conditions for sustainable peace. So again, you see the kind of work at negative, the reducing harm, reducing violence, preventing violence, as well as building and constructing something positive. And the connections in peace education in Korea, I've worked a lot with that and different concepts of peace education that people have, but in general, peace education works at how we deal with relationships in the class, what kinds of skills we help to practice and model, the content that we present and how we approach it, the methodologies that we use, and the education systems that we're part of and how we influence that. So peace education, there's a number of Korean organizations that are also working at peace education in schools, including reunification education, which is moving in that direction. So in my experience, I've had a chance to work at all of these things within the language education area. And I think the biggest thing for me is collaborating with local colleagues, Korean colleagues who are already doing the work of peace building, who are engaged in and working with peace education in their classes. And as a language learner, as a learner of Korean, working with peace building practitioners, I've had a lot of great opportunities to explore my own language use and how my Korean is a language of peace or not, and in which ways I'm using my multiple languages to work at peace building. So these are some of the kind of core concepts that we're talking about, and we will continue the conversation with Jocelyn to talk more about the linguistics aspect.
Great, thank you. So yeah, I want to start by talking a little bit about applied linguistics. I assume that many of us are language teachers or working in this field. So applied linguistics, as we know it today, can be maybe informally defined as a language-centered problem-solving enterprise, or maybe a little more formally as the academic field, which connects knowledge about language to decision-making in the real world. As you might know, in the early years, applied linguistics focused a lot on second and foreign language learning and teaching. And that remains a core area of applied linguistics today. But as it became more of an autonomous field from about the mid-1980s, the scope expanded to include theoretical and empirical investigation of a broader range of issues and real-world problems in which language is a central issue. And if you are here today, it's because you probably know that an important real-world problem is violence, right? And there are different types of violence, including linguistic violence. So we might think about insults or hate speech as kind of an extreme example. But there are other kinds of violence as well that result due to conflict in and across the different dimensions that Cheryl already mentioned, right? From the more inner to the ecological. And we can think of examples like suicide, and we'll hear Virginia talk about that a little bit later, or domestic violence, or war, or global warming. And we all know probably that interactions are mediated by language and communication. And as such, the role of both is really quite important to peace. Although many may not have paid explicit attention to this connection, and that was certainly the case for me. I have studied linguistics, and I studied TESOL, and I studied education, and I've done so for quite some time, but the term peace didn't actually come up in any significant or remarkable way in my formal studies. And I only really became cognizant of the term peace linguistics fairly recently, a few years ago, after I started studying and learning about and trying to practice nonviolent communication. So to kind of try to make sense of this term, peace linguistics, I recently defined it in this way: as an interdisciplinary field guided by the goal of promoting peace and peace building through systematic structure, systematic study, deliberate teaching, and conscious use of languages in different modalities, spoken, written, and sign. So this definition is useful for me because it helps me to understand my experiences and also focus on my goals. So let me talk a little bit about my experience and also about my goals. So I am a polyglot, and I have various language learning and teaching experiences, But still, there are many things that I take for granted about the ways that I use language or languages and communicate. And I'm sure that that's the same for all of us in this room. And I just want to be more aware of how I use language and communicate. And that means both in terms of my strengths and my shortcomings. And for a selfish reason, I want to know more about this to improve my personal, relationships. But also, since I'm a teacher, I want to, be able to be a better model and provider of feedback to students or to teachers in training or who are doing professional development. I have also engaged in reflective practice with the KOTESOL SIG since about 2012. And in 2015, I founded the Social Justice SIG in KOTESOL. And the reasons for these are that I wanted to be thinking more carefully and also more critically about my teaching. And these activities have helped me to be more deliberate in my practice. In my classes, I have a lot of liberty because I can not only just adapt materials and create them, but I can also develop courses and learning experiences for students. And more, I want to think about how to reframe these in terms of peace building goals. And then I have also been interested in research and ways that language is used or maybe not used for peaceful purposes, and also thinking about the possible thinking and feeling processes behind these, as well as ways it is taught and learned to have these outcomes. And I have explored things like English as a lingua franca and intercultural communication with my students. And since I prefer social learning to learn about these types of things in community, I recently started a Facebook group called Peace Linguistics, which Cheryl and Virginia are also members of. And we would like to welcome you to join as well, because we hope that we can share about and develop this area together. And with that being said, I'm going to pass on the mic to Virginia.
Yes. Okay. So, like I said, I teach at Korea University Sage on campus. And I'm sure, like many of you, it's probably a challenge to incorporate principles of peace linguistics into the classroom. Administration at Korea University is more concerned about the students' abilities than they are about the students' personalities and how they're growing. But I do have one class where I've been able to incorporate aspects of peace building, and that course is called Screen English. And in Screen English, we are watching the movie Dead Poet Society, and you can see the picture up there. And we spend quite a bit of time talking about issues that face them as students. We talk about pressure from parents, and we talk about difficult choices between money or job satisfaction, and we talk about suicide. And they're given time to express their opinions in groups and then in class. So there's a bit of a build-up to this end project. So after they've done homework assignments and an essay on the movie, I show them the scene where the main character, Justin, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, I show them the main character, Neil Perry here. He kills himself right after he finds out his parents are going to send him to military school. He wants to be an actor, but his father has just completely rejected the thought. And he's been pushing for Neil to be a doctor. So I ask each group to consider this ending and rewrite the ending from the scene where his parents say he's going to go to military school. So actually the scene ends, you can see him here, Neil Perry. He says, I was good. I was really, really good. And then that's where the cut off is. So the students, they're not only to rewrite the ending of the movie, but they're also to act out their script, either in a live dramatic performance. And this was, of course, before COVID, or in a video that the class can watch. So Neil is to make life choices that are in accordance with Carpe Diem, or seize the day. And that's a prominent theme in the movie. This is very self-directed, as I prefer to be a cheerleader for what they're doing at this point in the semester. And they get class time to work on 2 to 3 pages of script that has enough dialogue for 6 to 9 minutes of acting. And I debrief with the groups on what they've accomplished for the class hour. And on rehearsal day, the students get to say their lines and practice their dialogue. And then they're left to record their videos over the weekend in whatever way they see fit. So I created a space for them to take on a character who's thought deeply about suicide and alternatives to it. And okay, next slide, Jocelyn. Okay, I've been fortunate to have good results with this project. For some students, Neil has gone off to Hollywood or joined small town theater productions, saying absolutely nothing to his father. Braver students have had Neil and his father communicate in scenes where Neil doesn't get to go off anywhere or do what he wants. Regardless of where their ideas take them, I'm hoping for them to realize that genuine communication takes a lot of heart and patience and commitment. And I've mentioned this, but this project allows quite a bit of freedom. And one of the things that the students tend to like about it is it's not a final exam, and they can express themselves through the characters they've chosen. So my classroom or my Zoom room, it's a safe place. It's a safe place for them. And I'd like to add that many of them do make the connections to the stress of trying to make something of yourself in South Korea. The extreme stress has led to suicide in more than a few cases. And I'm giving them an avenue to discuss that topic or other related topics. Suicide, that's just something we talk about after the fact. So you're leaving friends and family pondering why and how it could have been prevented. This project is my small contribution to that world and the world of peace building. And I'm hoping my students are going to remember this in the many moments in class that led up to it, when they hear of someone who has committed suicide. And I'm hoping that they have something valuable to contribute to the conversation. So, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah. Okay. So that's an example, but it depends on what you're teaching and where it fits. You know, if you think it could fit into your classroom, we're going to encourage you here to think that through. But okay, we have some discussion prompts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we kind of gave our little introduction, and now we want to have a chance to talk together a little bit and to interact, and it doesn't have to be Q&A, but also maybe a chance for you to answer some of our questions that we have, like how do our descriptions that we've talked about, peace building, peace education, peace linguistics, practically implementing this in the classroom, how does this fit with your experiences of peace, language, and education? Or maybe what is something that you've done in your class already, and now thinking about it, you realize, oh yeah, this relates to peace linguistics, peace language education. Yeah, there's a connection here. Or maybe you're thinking about how you could integrate this into your teaching or research, and what avenues are you interested in exploring. So feel free to start the discussion and we can interact with each other. It's a small group, so it's perfectly fine to turn on your mics and to share then.
Of course, if you want to type your comments in the chat too, go ahead.
I may.
Please.
Sure, Patrick. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
think that was Patrick who raised his hand, and that was me who said, if I may.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Go first, Jose. Go ahead and go first.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I came into the presentation because it was an interesting topic to me, and it's something that I've never actually done in class before. But what I have done with stuff that pertain to current events and current situations and important issues like climate change or biodiversity, the extinction of species, is I would take an article at a graded reader level and have the students read it. And also, too, I've prepared a few authentic listening materials around that article and have the kids listen to a couple of native speakers speaking at authentic level. And then we analyze the speech patterns and stuff like that about the issue. So they got the issue at a fairly close to their level kind of vocabulary in the article. Then they had a bit more of a challenge listening to the conversation at a higher level. And then within those things, there were some discussion questions that made them think a bit more about those particular issues. And in this case, I think I could probably do something very similar with these issues, pertaining to what's happening, say, in civil wars in Africa, or what's happening right now in Myanmar, and and recording a couple of new conversations to introduce the kids. So I think that's the way that I would approach it, with something that I've done before, with getting them to see something, read something, listen to something, and then discuss something based on the topic.
Definitely. That sounds like the peace education content that you're working with, an ecological piece, right? That you've already done some with looking at what the impact of the kind of outer dimension of that first diagram. Definitely.
And also, peace education pedagogy, right? With scaffolded learning and multimodality. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think the kids also respond because sometimes I can find some really good videos to relate to certain topics. I found one really good video, a bit longer, and I had to cut it down myself with a video editor, but it was a really interesting video about these poor communities in India that had literally tons and tons of old clothing from the West, like how Uniqlo or these fast fashion shops will say, oh, we recycle your clothes for you, so we're very environmental. They take it up, they bundle them, ship them off somewhere. And this is one of those places that become a destination. And so this movie was about these women and their daily lives as they sort through all of these clothes. And it's really interesting because these are poor Indian women, and they're just trying to imagine what kind of girl is going to wear this halter top with these pink hot shorts, and they're going, oh my God. And they were, and it's just really interesting how their perspective was on it. So even within the whole topic of what is a relatively peaceful community, I mean, you're talking about negative peace, but there is no social justice because of the economic differential. The video hit the kids pretty hard and made them think about a lot of stuff. And if you can bring videos to them, I think they appreciate that quite a lot.
Definitely.
Yes. One of the reasons why we do Dead Poet Society is because I find most South Korean young adults, I'm not sure if you can call my students young adults, but they relate to the characters, they relate to the stress. So yeah, I agree with you that finding something that works, that pulls at them is a great thought there.
Yeah, one of the peace education, Kathy Matsui from Japan often talks about 3 aspects of peace education that create an effective peace education lesson, and that is to touch the mind, touch the heart, and take action. So to be able to stimulate some thinking, some critical thinking, some creative thinking, to touch the heart, to provoke some empathy, or to set up a situation where people can feel something about the situation, and then creating an opportunity to take action. So like in Virginia's example, they are rewriting the scene, they're doing something with it. And so that's something that sometimes we stop short of in language class, but at least the production of the language is something that is action as well. But there are other ways that students can think of to be able to take action. Like how can you help let other people know about this? Or are there ways to respond to this particular issue that would actually make some kind of change in their lives or in their communities? Thank you, Jose, for sharing. That's great. Great ideas.
Patrick, would you like to go ahead?
Sure, I can. Tell me if it's too noisy and I'll shut the window. The city's having fireworks again, so I'm hearing loud booms. I'm in the firework capital of the world. I think my city always has fireworks. So something I do is, especially while working with, for example, junior high kids on down, and I did this a lot in Korea too. That works really well. Again, I try and cover all levels, from down to the personal level of fighting with a classmate all the way up to two countries not getting along and everything in between. And one of the ways I do that, again, is kind of with a bit of video clips or even books to bring in stories that they can relate to. And I especially find with for kids like Dr. Seuss, and even into the junior high kids, he's done a couple of books like the Butter Battle book, or Sneetches, which is more like, I guess, a statement on segregation and racism. You know, I don't always necessarily read the whole story because he can put in some difficult words, but we can look at the pictures and talk about the pictures because the pictures can explain it. And then follow it up with showing he usually has an animated version of the things. And then we talk about how does it impact, or what kind of, before we even do that, then I usually do like a little activity. So for example, if you're not familiar with the Sneetches stories, there's two groups of these human-like creatures, and one has stars and one doesn't. The one that has stars think they're superior and are always putting down the ones that don't have stars. And so I pass out little green stars to like half the class, and we kind of act out, like the ones with the green stars get to be superior for 10 minutes or however long, so that they can all understand and feel what it's like to be segregated into two different groups. And then we'll talk about how it pertains in their life. What have they been bullied? Have they been, encountered this kind of thing? And then, slowly work it up the ladder to a more international scene of like, colonialism, where the Europeans felt that they were superior to all other ethnicities of the world. And like this. So that's something I've always had good success with, especially little bitty ones. And I'll take similar ideas in just a more complex level and do it with the adults or high school kids and college kids. So that's similar to things that you all have talked about that I do with my classes.
Yeah. That's great. And integrating the existing literature, but taking a kind of the peace lens that you're talking about. Yeah. And I think that approach also, if you don't have the choice of content, I know some people don't have the freedom to choose exactly what text they are using in class or exactly what material they're using in class. But the similar kind of approach of kind of overlaying this peace lens and looking at where is the conflict in the text. All story has conflict, right? What is the conflict? How do you relate that to your own life and community and world? And what does it remind you of? Those kinds of principle guiding questions can be really helpful to promote the use of language and reflection around peace-related issues.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up, that we don't really get a choice sometimes. Like we had I think it was an English culture class, and like all the professors had to turn teaching one class, and they brought in a piece of English culture. And I'm one of the few people of color on the faculty, and everything the teachers had brought in were things like different sports, genres of music, but I came in and brought like diversity in the United States. And so I tried to cover things like that in one class, which doesn't always work, but it brought attention to like things they had never considered. Like I started off the class with like, who discovered America? And then like at the end, like, you know, after that, getting the answer, like everyone's like Columbus. I was like, no, he didn't. There are already people living there. And like starting off a quiz, like find the Americans. And I made every single answer a person of color. And like all the white people were from other countries. They did get rid of that class because there had been complaints about like it was difficult to teach and grade with so many professors involved. But now I have a travel English class, and I was hoping to make it more intercultural. Like I really love, I call them intersections of discomfort, right? Where we talk about class, gender, and race. And I feel like I'm toothless to a degree now, like because well, in general, the staff has been told like don't talk about like things that are uncomfortable. Like literally, it's like don't do things that will make people uncomfortable. So let's avoid controversial topics. So like the best I've been able to think about how to bring in other cultures and get students interested is having a very, I guess, like old-fashioned type of project where they choose a country and they have to write about it. And not everyone gets to do an English-speaking country that's like full of white people. Like, once we have Canada, Australia, and US out of the way, you have to choose something else. So I'm trying to I'm struggling with ideas for like how to build more stuff for them.
Right. And I think the other thing, like in peace education, we talk about content, but that's only one aspect of it. I think like when content is restricted, when we have limited view of content, and even putting a peace lens on things is a little bit restricted. Like, for example, if you're teaching a like TOEFL prep class, it's really hard to work with the content, but working with some of the skills that students are learning, how we communicate in English, how we work together in groups, how we resolve conflict when our group team is not working together really well. I remember one class, which was like an academic writing class, and we had a group work, and we ended up having to have some serious mediation in the class because of the group work. But following that work at addressing the conflict together and learning the English that would be needed to communicate in that cross-cultural situation, in that group, they actually came through the conflict, built stronger relationships, and completed their project much better than it would have been otherwise. So I think that there's also like opportunity to look beyond the content as well, and to look at what kind of relationships are being nurtured in the classroom, what kind of skills are they being practiced. Language is at the center of peace building, and so we have an excellent opportunity as language educators and learners to highlight what is it that is creating better relationships and what is de-escalating conflict, and what are we saying that might be escalating conflict, or might be needed to escalate conflict if it's latent conflict to the point where we can actually discuss it. Yeah.
Annika, just so you know, most of my classes are not like this. Like administration has told me, you know, this is the book for this class and this is the other book for that class. So that I think for a lot of people that actually creates stress, but I like what Cheryl said there, that, you know, if you can think of it as building relationships within the classroom, that's a good aspect. The other thing I wanted to say is Korea has changed over the past 10 years, and I've been here for about 20. Like in the first 10 years, I would say, okay, yeah, it's a monoculture, but I can't say that now. There's a lot of international families. it's way more diverse than it used to be. And Koreans do need those skills. They need those skills of interpersonal communication. They need to know how to talk to other people. And yeah, we need to teach them that. We need to show them what those skills are and how to build that. Give them some points on that.
Yamako has a hand raised.
Amaka, yes.
I've worked with adults, but I've also worked with much younger children. And I feel like, especially those of us who are language, quote, experts, I feel like first and foremost, it's like you have to model the language in your classroom, and you have to be the model. And sometimes we don't do a very good job of it ourselves because we're not aware of where we are in terms of how our learners see us. We may be part of the inner circle, we may be part of the outer circle, maybe we're the same nationality as our learners. And sometimes I feel like the word choices that we use that distinguishes us from we're not aware of that sometimes when we're teaching. And I think that since we are language experts and we do have a very good foundation of how grammar is used in English classes, I think we can integrate those and use more meaning and use in the classroom to teach our second language or our foreign language learners how to use English to, for their own empowerment.
And that's something
you.
we may not always do if we're focused a lot on content teaching, for
Right.
example, right? So yeah, trying to be explicit about drawing attention to certain aspects and giving students opportunities also to practice, right?
I mean, I think maybe because I think you also mentioned that you're a polyglot. The main advantage, I think, of being able to kind of flow between languages is that even in their L1, they're saying very hurtful things that they're not aware of. And even our society, we see that in our parents and in the other adults. And so I think awareness is most important first. So if you're not aware in your first language, you're probably not going to be aware in your second or third language. So hopefully that comes at a younger age, more so than an older age, but yeah.
Yeah, so ideally we would be integrating this into,
Right.
elementary or even,
Right.
daycare level courses, yeah.
And then
But I think, oh, sorry. Mhm.
yeah, sorry. And I think the other thing I wanted to say was, and obviously Japan also, our adolescents, are many of them are experiencing friends who have either died or because of COVID or because of suicide. And while people say don't address it, I often find that with my learners, my adolescent ones, depending on the environment that they're in, if you create that safe environment, as she mentioned, I think they want to talk about it. There is no other place that they can talk about it. And sometimes in your second or foreign language, it's easier because you don't feel that guilt when you talk about it in your first language. And I find that a lot with adults as well.
Definitely.
It could be healing in some ways.
I've found that as well. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that the kind of relationships that we build in the classroom can create the space to learn how to communicate in a second or subsequent language in ways that we can't in our first. And I've experienced that myself. I mentioned it briefly, but I was running out of time. But my Korean learning experience was my peace language learning experience. I didn't have an awareness of my speaking in English and how violent sometimes I was able to speak in communication with in my relationships with family, with friends, and through learning Korean in the context of all these people who were working at learning peace building and practicing it in their work and in their lives, it was such a rich environment to me to be able to learn Korean that not only made me a better Korean speaker, but also made me a better English speaker because it changed my awareness and it changed how I perceived my interactions with other people through language. Yeah.
So that might be an example of very successful language learning.
Definitely.
I see that we have kind of reached our time limit, so I'm not sure. I think we need to keep to very brief final comments here. I guess I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who has come today and for your sharing of experiences. It has been wonderful to have this kind of interaction, and I hope that you leave feeling inspired, since some of you mentioned that as a goal when you arrived.
I say we give them a round of applause.
Thank you. I'm not sure if
Okay.
Cheryl or Virginia would like
Yeah,
to.
I'm so happy to meet you, and I'm always excited to meet other people who are interested in these topics and in the integration with linguistics and language and education. I hope that we can keep in touch, whether that's through the Peace Linguistics Facebook page, if you're on Facebook. I'm putting my email in the chat if you would like to keep in touch that way. Feel free, and I hope that we can meet each other again in these kinds of conference sessions and continue the conversation.
Cheryl, sorry, Virginia, would you like to say something?
Yeah, just I'd like to say that I finished my second master's degree just over the summer, and one of the last courses I took was an applied linguistics course where we were looking at language policies all over the world. And basically what I was looking at was really a history of racism in Europe, in the United States, even in Canada. You know, it's just, it's rampant. And Jocelyn at that time sent an invitation to join her group. And I went, it's just one of those things. It was just an aha moment. Like, this is obvious. We should be teaching language in this way. We should be empowering the students. We should be making them feel safe. And when we need to, of course, give them the language that they need. So yeah, I'd like to thank Jocelyn for that. And you're welcome to contact me if you know, need some ideas and go over things.
And I'd like to make an announcement. This is the KOTESOL National Conference, but at the KOTESOL International Conference, for perhaps the first time ever, there will be a strand on peace linguistics and also peace language education and peace education. So we want to encourage anyone to submit a proposal who might be interested in that. You have until the 15th of January to do that. And like we said, we'd love to stay in touch. So our emails are in the chat box. And if you use Facebook, please join our group, Peace Linguistics, and spread the word so that we can develop together. We have a few references here. If you want to consult them further, please let us know. Otherwise, I guess our time is up, and we should say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
interaction.
Thank you.
We'd love to
Thank
stay in
you.
touch.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And Jocelyn,
Mhm.
yeah, you can make me the host.
Okay.
Greg, yeah.